Psst, check out my Patreon. Well, dang, it's about time we got another him episode again. It feels like ages since the last time the most formidable Powerpuff Girls villain appeared in the show. Actually, he hasn't appeared at all since the whole Power of 4 anime knockoff thing. This is also the only time him even appears in a season 3 episode, marking this as his final appearance in the reboot as far as we're concerned. Our Brand is Chaos, a play on the 2015 film starring Sandra Bullock known as Our Brand is Crisis, which happens to be a play on the original 2005 film released under the same name. This is an episode in which him trades Bubbles and Buttercup $1 in exchange for complete and total ownership over Blossom's soul. I'll be getting into the slew of problems and implications in regards to that will probably be formulating in your head as the video goes on. Although first, I want to mention that this episode certainly knocks him's evil status down several pegs, and I'll go out and say this is my least favorite of him's main 4 appearances in the show. The others being Electric Buttercup, Imagine That, and Power of 4. I'm not really counting Tiara Trouble or Secret Swapper of Doom because he really doesn't do anything in those episodes besides act as a catalyst and show up towards the end. Oh, speaking of Imagine That, remember how the show forgot to give him his voice echo effect in that episode? Well, it forgot to do it again here too. Another case of the show not giving enough of an effort to care. Also, this is another case where I consider this a Blossom episode, not so much a mixed card, and the thumbnail reflects that as such. But without further ado, I guess it's time for a big ol' storm of chaos. It is time! The episode opens up with Blossom reading a book on tax codes when who else but the menacing villain him arrives to claim her soul and take her away to his chaos dimension. As I had mentioned in my introduction, he had bartered with Bubbles and Buttercup for the deed to her soul, much to Blossom and our surprise at this point because so far in the episode we are completely unaware of what is even causing this to happen. Well, as it turns out, it's because her sisters had been eyeing up this fancy schmancy bobsled, or more specifically, the Snowsploder 7000 Turbo, because that's what their interest of the episode just so happens to be in.
All I got is $4. What about you, Bubs? Only $580. Crud! We're $1 short!
Yes, this is going exactly where it looks like. Thus, with just $1 short, they unfortunately can't afford to get the bobsled. Well, that's a darn shame, or at least it would be if him didn't happen to show up right on cue and tempt them with an offer they couldn't refuse.
I will give you $1. All I ask in return is the most important thing in the world to you. The soul of your sister Blossom.
$1. That's all the girls need if they want to afford that bobsled, although I'm still hung up on where Bubbles managed to obtain a whopping $580 because she's like 6 years old, doesn't have a job, is supposedly meant to be depicted as part of a lower class family, and hasn't been rewarded for saving the day on screen at all. An alternative to taking this $1 from him is to go back home and ask the professor to borrow $1, even if it is sketchy to not tell him why they need the dollar, or even to just say they want to buy some candy at the store. It's better than the outcome we're given in the episode. I get the comedy comes from the fact that they blindly trade away their sister like she's worth nothing, but this completely sacrifices the characters and their relationship in doing so. At least when Mr. Krabs did it in SpongeBob, he immediately regretted it and broke down in utter terror and guilt over what he had done. Not Buttercup and Bubbles though, they couldn't be happier. This really shows how much the reboot actually cared about portraying its 3 main characters. This show's about sisterhood, everybody, I swear. $585 is also super cheap for like an official bobsled like that, just saying.
I like the red ink.
Yeah, ink.
But let's see, not only is it terrible for Blossom Sisters to sell her soul, especially without her present because she wasn't even allowed to consent to this, and why the hell do Buttercup and Bubbles get the say on their sister's life anyways? They don't own her, they aren't her guardian, they have no form of possession over her soul. They don't even have the taxes to claim her on. But Buttercup literally already learned this exact lesson before with the exact same villain creating the exact same scenario without even being told she was trading her sister's soul. Bubbles.
Hey man, you made a deal. I gave you the guitar, and now your sisters are part of my band.
I'm sorry I sold your souls for rock and roll. I'm sorry I sold your souls. I'm sorry I sold your souls. I'm sorry I sold your souls.
Now this time she is directly told by the devil that that's what he wants, and she does it anyways. This is a blatant case of not thinking through what the characters have experienced and learned in the show already, or not understanding what they should logically do in the situation. She traded her sister's soul for a guitar in Electric Buttercup. We're literally redoing the same concept again because apparently the reboot had zero other ideas for what to do with him as a villain. Which is sad because this is a demon of chaos with supernatural powers, a creepy yet gripping and appealing persona, and a great sense of style. And this show couldn't think of anything to do with him. Again, I repeat that he's only had 3 major appearances prior to this episode. 3! And the show is already repeating itself, just like how it repeated the Fashionista's mind control plan. But I digress, and so him takes Blossom to hell. I'm sorry, the Chaos Zone, which is basically just hell. In fact, it really just seems like an inferior version of Discord's home from Friendship is Magic. This is just a basic color morphing gradient background probably made in Adobe After Effects with a bunch of rotating PNGs floating around. It's just so uninspired, empty, and boring.
Nothing makes sense. Bananas and blocks?
In what way is bananas and blocks floating next to each other chaotic? Most of the shit floating around is food too, so there isn't even really that much entropy amongst the items chosen to be floating in him's realm. The idea of him living in some sort of normal apartment with a TV felt ironic and silly whilst simultaneously remaining memorable, like when he was caught exercising in his living room during the episode Telephonies in the original. Hell, even his redesigned lair in the later seasons was way more interesting because it gave him a sense of omnipotence. He had the ability to observe anything and everything from within his chambers. This concept is genius for a character like him because as what is essentially the devil himself, he should have a lot of agency over the other characters. And by giving him the ability to look into the past and present and what have you in his lair, to be able to see everything like that, gives him a truly powerful sense and is presented brilliantly through this lair of his. The first lair gave him a sense of humanity and the other gave him a sense of power. They both served different but essential purposes in establishing his character. This is just empty space with random PNGs, which I feel is an adequate representation of this show's understanding of the character. He was mostly good in Power of 4, don't get me wrong, but even I found him turning people into random objects was a little out of place back then. It just sort of cements this feeling and detracts from the special in retrospect. But I've gone on about this enough. If I go in depth anymore, it may as well become a character study video. Him ditches Blossom to go hang out with his mariachi band, and we cut back to Buttercup and Bubbles, who are seen bobsledding, where they run into Johnny Avalanche, who invites them to participate in Bobsled-ageddon.
I want the two of you to race for us at the biggest bobsled race in the world, Bobsled-ageddon!
Because Spoonageddon wasn't a good enough Armageddon joke, I guess. This scene solely exists to provide a gap in time for him to come back from mariachi practice and discover a mysterious door attached to a never-ending building.
I don't remember a door being here. I don't remember a giant wall being here either.
Turns out that Blossom somehow managed to reorganize the entire Chaos realm into a functioning company known as Chaos Incorporated in a matter of some unspecified amount of time, and she's got the entire business running in complete organization because, as we all know, that's her only defining character trait. Him isn't quite sure what to make of this, and I'm not quite sure either because there are tons of questions to be asked regarding how Blossom did this, but hey, let's just roll with it. We don't get to see much more of his reaction before getting cut off anyways.
What?
Sounds Martinsville News, Bobsled-ageddon.
Yes, during this time, Buttercup and Bubbles have made a name for themselves as they have magically appeared on magazines and cereal boxes and even created a record on vinyl. Did I mention the Snow Sploder 7000 Turbo also includes a waffle maker? It is here where Buttercup threatens the competition, also taking part in Bobsled-ageddon, on live television, which causes the Tracer triplets to retort for this one scene and one scene only. Ironically, Tracer is a good name for them because they are literally just the same character design copy and pasted with a different hairstyle and bodysuit color. There really was no point in having them in the episode because they contribute nothing to the plot. They literally just show up on the side during this news broadcast so Buttercup can threaten them, and then this.
We don't think baby animals are cute.
Yeah, I guess they also exist to just piss Bubbles off so they can get beat up off screen, but since we don't really get to see it, it's just unsatisfying. Well, I've had enough of their B-plot. So back with him again, we find that he's working in a cubicle now making customer service calls because the reboot really loves to mistreat and demean the status of characters it didn't create itself. At the very least, he didn't abide by Blossom's dress code, which she quickly chastises him for, but it is somewhat counterintuitive considering the company she's trying to run is called Chaos Inc. I'm not sure if this company she's running is meant to provide a service or if it just sells chaos, whatever that means, but if our brand is chaos, as the episode title suggests, then isn't this uniform policy contradictory to the very principles the company was founded on? Isn't that a little hypocritical? Oh, I get it now. This is an insurance company. Now it makes sense.
If you don't like how I'm running things, maybe I should transfer you to a different department.
Oh yeah? Where are you going to send me? The mailroom!
Okay, this is how low the reboot is willing to make this character look. This draws the line for me, but thus him hatches a scheme to tear up the soul contract without Blossom knowing, undoing the agreement between himself and her sisters. He starts by shoving the leprechaun mug he had happened to be talking to throughout all of this inside one of the mail tubes, forcing Blossom out of her office and giving him ample enough time to go through her files and find the contract. Did I say ample enough time? I meant a whopping 3 seconds. Now, considering this guy has supernatural abilities, you'd think it would be easier than that. But who's really surprised at this point?
I'll be right there.
That'll keep her busy. Now to find and tear up that soul contract.
Hello, him. Looking for this?
Okay, so as I said, 3 seconds. It's important to note that this clip was not edited. Blossom literally floated out of the room, him looked around for 3 seconds, and she came back. Like, what? This show honestly expects its audience to believe that Blossom whisked all the way down to the mailroom and all the way back, floating at the speed that she's seen exiting the room and catching him that quickly. If the show wanted Blossom to catch him in the act, that's fine, like I'm not complaining about that, but at least have her fly out of the room at like the speed of sound or something instead of just this leisurely float. If she was seen rushing at a very, very breakneck speed, I could totally buy her getting to the mailroom, fixing the problem, and getting right back because, you know, she's able to fly fast, super speed, that sort of thing. But instead, the show just completely contradicts the timing, but then again, I'm not surprised because when has the reboot ever understood the concept of time and executed it well? But I digress. This is the part where they fight. Okay, so not only is him firing random things the best that he can do, but Blossom actually sorts these in reverse alphabetized order. For a character obsessed with organization, you'd think a dialogue oversight like that wouldn't go unnoticed. The two fight some more, and eventually they both grab the contract and pull, ripping it in two and undoing the deal between him and Blossom's sisters, returning everything to normal. Or relative to how things were prior to Blossom coming to hell, that is. She poofs out of the Chaos Realm, him gets his chaos back, and Buttercup and Bubbles lose their bobsled during the final jump of the race and fall to their demise, even though that doesn't make any sense for a variety of reasons. One, the deal specifically stated that Buttercup and Bubbles traded Blossom's soul for $1. So that $1 should have poofed back to him from wherever it happened to be, not the bobsled. But that's a minor gripe, and I could see the argument going both ways. Secondly, however, the girls have withstood far more devastating scenarios that could have delivered them physical injury. Blossom and Bubbles were smothered under a truck full of dumbbells, and yet they came out without a scratch on them. Now you're telling me that these two girls just falling down a pit full of snow was enough to put them in full body casts? Where's the consistency? Third, the girls can fucking fly. Did the show honestly forget this? Oh, who am I kidding? Of course it did. They practically walk everywhere they go. Seriously, the concept of the girls falling into a pit and hurting themselves that way literally makes zero sense for the show because they can fly. That method of personal physical injury should not even be a thought. Following this moment, we see them sitting on their bed in those full body casts I mentioned, while Blossom asks them if they learned their lesson. And the episode ends there with Blossom reading them her tax codes. I think what bothers me and many others most about this episode is the fact that not once do Bubbles or Buttercup think about what they're doing or show any remorse for what they've done. And considering how the two managed to become super famous for their bobsledding abilities in some unspecified amount of time, how long of a time period was this episode taking place over? It's super unclear, especially considering how fast some things seem to occur, to the point that I am viewing this more as a compilation of individual events amongst the A and B plots that all occur over a dramatically extended period of time. Because if we were to assume that this all occurred in one continuous flow of time, it wouldn't make any sense. Just like the amount of time it takes Blossom to go from the office to the mailroom back to the office. But this even presents more conundrums. The professor clearly doesn't give a shit about one of his daughters disappearing off the face of the earth, apparently. Bubbles and Buttercup never once show any amount of regret or remorse for what they did, as I had said. And so, that's Our Brand is Chaos. This review definitely allowed me some time to talk about him as a character in the reboot, what with this being his last starring role and all, and that's primarily because he's my favorite character of the whole franchise. Again, I will say I am thankful that the show did not butcher him as much as Princess and Mojo and the Professor, even if he did get knocked down another peg here. He's still treated with some seriousness versus the usual dopey junk that most of the others are. If I were to rank competent recurring villains in the show, I would still put him at the top of the totem pole with Silico right below him, because they've both been the most consistent threatening antagonists amongst the recurring reboot villains. I don't really count one-offs, otherwise Butters from Blundercup would take the #1 spot. But that about does it. Not really a fan of this one, and I would not recommend it even though it is him's final appearance. We're better off remembering it as the kaiju beast in the Power of 4, honestly. Crazy to think that we've seen the end for so many things in the reboot so far, and with only a handful of episodes left to go, it'll all be over with pretty soon. Just as the end is inevitable for all of us, so is the end of this show. Enjoy this time while it lasts, because it is limited, and pretty soon my reviews of this show will reach their conclusion. See you in the next one.